There's a kind of knowledge that stays with you forever, not the facts you memorize for a test and forget the next week, not the skills you learn once and never use again, but the deep understanding that becomes part of who you are. The ancient samurai discovered something about learning that modern education has almost completely forgotten. And today, you're going to discover why everything you think you know about teaching and learning might be completely backwards. Have you ever had a teacher who changed your life? Not someone who just gave you information, but someone who transformed the way you see the world. Most people never experience this kind of relationship. They go through years of school, collect certificates and degrees, but never truly master anything. The samurai understood something we've lost. True knowledge isn't transferred, it's stolen. True mastery isn't taught, it's earned. And the bond between teacher and student isn't just about information, it's about transformation. Before I show you how this ancient system worked and how you can apply it today, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment about the most important teacher or mentor in your life. This helps the channel reach more people who need to hear this message. Thank you for your attention. Now, back to the story. The story I'm about to tell you begins in feudal Japan with a young man named Kenji. He wasn't special. He had no exceptional talents, no family connections, nothing that would make him stand out. But Kenji had something that most people never develop, an obsession. He wanted to master the sword more than he wanted to breathe. At 15 years old, he traveled alone to a remote temple where the legendary swordsman Takeda Sensei lived. Everyone knew Takeda's name. They said he could defeat 10 men without breaking a sweat. They said his students became invincible warriors, but they also said something else. Takeda never accepted new students, ever. Kenji arrived at the temple gate just before dawn. He knelt in the dirt and waited. Hours passed. The sun rose, burned hot overhead, then began to set. Still, Kenji knelt. His legs screamed in pain. His stomach twisted with hunger, but he didn't move. The next morning came, then another. For 3 days, Kenji knelt at that gate without food, without water, without shelter. On the 4th morning, the gate opened. An old man stood there, weathered face, scarred hands, eyes that seemed to see right through you. This was Takeda. "Why are you here?" the master asked. Kenji's voice was hoarse from thirst. "To learn from you, Sensei." Takeda studied him for a long moment. "I don't teach." Kenji felt his heart sink, but something in Takeda's words caught his attention. The master didn't say, "I won't teach you." He said, "I don't teach." There was a difference. Then Kenji said carefully, "May I stay and observe?" For the first time, Takeda's lips curved into the smallest smile. "You may stay, but understand this. I will not explain, I will not demonstrate for you. I will not slow down so you can follow. You will clean, you will cook, you will maintain the grounds. And if you're smart enough to learn something while you're here, that's your business, not mine." This might sound harsh to modern ears. It might sound like a terrible way to teach. But here's what most people don't understand. Takeda wasn't being cruel. He was practicing something the Japanese called Nusumu, stealing the technique. In traditional samurai education, knowledge wasn't something given freely. It was something you had to work for, observe carefully, and earn through dedication. Because the samurai understood a fundamental truth about learning. People value what they work for. What comes easy is forgotten easy. What costs you everything becomes part of your soul. Kenji spent his first month doing nothing but sweeping floors and washing dishes. He never touched a sword, he never practiced a technique. But every morning at dawn, he watched Takeda train. The master would perform the same movements, the same kata, over and over with absolute precision. No explanations, no corrections, no acknowledgement that Kenji even existed. And this is where most modern students would give up. They'd say, "This is a waste of time, I'm not learning anything. I should find a teacher who actually teaches." But Kenji understood something crucial. Learning and being taught are not the same thing. Every night after his chores, Kenji would take a stick and practice what he'd observed. He'd repeat Takeda's movements in the darkness, alone, with no feedback, no validation, no confirmation he was doing it right. His arms ached, his form was probably terrible, but he kept going. 1 month became 2, 2 became 3. Still, Takeda said nothing. Then, on the morning of the 100th day, something changed. Kenji was sweeping the training area when Takeda suddenly tossed him a wooden sword. "Block," the master said, and immediately struck. Kenji's body moved before his mind could think. The training stick came up, deflected the blow perfectly. Takeda struck again. Again, Kenji blocked. They moved through a rapid exchange, 10, 20 strikes, and Kenji's body responded with movements he didn't consciously know he'd learned. When they finished, Takeda simply said, "Your stance is improving, but your left foot is still lazy." Then he walked away. That was it. No praise, no celebration, just a simple observation. But in that moment, Kenji understood everything. He had learned more in those 3 months of observation and silent practice than he could have learned in years of formal instruction. Because his learning hadn't been passive. It had been active, intentional, stolen. Here's what modern education gets completely backwards. We think learning happens when someone explains something to you. We think teaching means breaking everything down into simple steps and spoon-feeding information. But the samurai knew better. True learning happens when you're forced to figure things out yourself. When you have to observe closely, think deeply, practice endlessly, and discover the answers through your own effort. This is what they called Minarai, learning by watching. Let me explain something that will sound controversial. The best teachers don't teach. They create conditions where learning becomes inevitable. They demonstrate mastery. They set standards. They provide an environment, but they don't hold your hand. They don't explain every detail. They don't make it easy for you, because easy learning creates weak understanding. Difficult learning creates deep mastery. Takeda never sat Kenji down and explained the theory behind each movement. He never broke down the techniques into digestible pieces. He never gave positive reinforcement or motivational speeches. He simply lived his craft with absolute dedication and allowed Kenji to witness it. But here's the crucial part. Takeda's apparent indifference wasn't cruelty, it was respect. Respect for Kenji's intelligence. Respect for his ability to figure things out. Respect for his commitment to the path. In traditional samurai schools, they had a saying, "The teacher's job is not to make the student comfortable, it's to make the student capable." Think about that for a moment. How different is that from modern education, where we obsess over making everything easy, accessible, engaging? Where we worry constantly about student comfort, student feelings, student enjoyment. The samurai would have laughed at this approach, not because they were heartless, but because they understood something we've forgotten. Comfort is the enemy of growth. As Kenji's training progressed, Takeda slowly began to involve him in more advanced practices. But even then, the master never explained. He would demonstrate once, perfectly, then wait to see if Kenji could replicate it. Sometimes Kenji failed for weeks before getting it right. But when he finally succeeded, the knowledge was his completely. He owned it in a way that students who are simply told the answer never do. This is what the samurai called kyuden, oral transmission, but not in the way you might think. Kyuden wasn't about lectures or explanations. It was about the rare moments when the master would share a single sentence, a fragment of wisdom, at exactly the right moment when the student was ready to hear it. These moments were precious because they were earned. They came only after months or years of dedicated practice. They came only when the student had demonstrated not just skill, but character. One afternoon, 2 years into his training, Kenji was practicing his forms when Takeda approached. The master watched in silence for several minutes. Then he said just 7 words, "You're still thinking." Warriors don't think, they respond. That was all, 7 words. But because Kenji had spent 2 years preparing to hear them, those 7 words contained more wisdom than 1,000 lectures. He understood immediately that his technique was good, but his mind was still interfering. He was still deciding, calculating, hesitating. True mastery meant the body responding before the mind could interrupt. This is the power of the traditional teacher-student relationship. It wasn't about information transfer, it was about transformation. The student didn't just learn techniques, they absorbed the teacher's mindset, their values, their way of being in the world. They learned not just how to hold a sword, but how to hold themselves. Not just how to strike, but how to live. Let me tell you about another crucial aspect of samurai education that's completely missing today. The concept of Senpai-Kohai, the senior-junior relationship. In traditional schools, older students were responsible for teaching younger ones. This wasn't just to reduce the master's workload. It was because teaching is one of the best ways to learn. When you have to teach something to someone else, you're forced to understand it at a deeper level. You can't just memorize steps, you have to grasp principles. Kenji spent his first 2 years learning. His next 2 years, he spent teaching new students while continuing his own training. And he discovered something surprising. Teaching the basics to beginners forced him to refine his understanding of fundamentals. Questions from younger students made him examine things he'd taken for granted. The responsibility of being a guide made him more careful with his own practice, because he knew others were watching him the same way he'd watched Takeda. This created a system where knowledge flowed not just down from master to student, but across from senior to junior, and even back up from junior to senior. Everyone was simultaneously a teacher and a student. Everyone had something to learn and something to teach. This is what they called Kyosei, mutual development through shared struggle. But here's what made the samurai teacher-student bond truly special. It wasn't temporary, it wasn't transactional, it wasn't about paying tuition and receiving instruction. It was a lifelong relationship. Even after Kenji became a master swordsman himself, Takeda remained his sensei. Even when Kenji no longer needed technical instruction, he would return to seek wisdom, guidance, perspective. Because the relationship had never been just about swordsmanship, it had been about life itself. The bond between teacher and student in samurai culture was considered sacred, not in a religious sense, but in the sense that it represented something fundamental about human development. The teacher saw in the student their own legacy, their values and knowledge continuing beyond their death. The student saw in the teacher the person they could become, the embodiment of mastery they aspired to reach. This wasn't a transaction where you pay money and receive services. It was a mutual commitment. The teacher committed to holding impossibly high standards, to never accepting mediocrity, to pushing the student beyond what they thought possible. The student committed to absolute dedication, to respecting the teacher's time and knowledge, to never giving up no matter how hard it became. And here's the beautiful irony. Because the teacher didn't coddle the student, because they maintained high standards and refused to make things easy, the student developed real capability. And because of that real capability, the student developed genuine gratitude. Not the shallow gratitude of thank you for making this easy, but the deep gratitude of thank you for believing I was capable of more than I believed myself. After 5 years, Takeda called Kenji to the training hall one morning. "You're ready," the master said. "Ready for what, Sensei?" Kenji asked. "To teach. Go find your own students. Pass on what you've stolen." Kenji felt tears in his eyes, not because he was being sent away, but because he realized the truth. Takeda had been teaching him all along, not through explanations or demonstrations, but through example, not through words, but through presence, not by making things easy, but by making him strong enough to handle difficulty. So what does all this mean for you today? You're not training to be a samurai, you're not living in feudal Japan, but the principles remain the same. If you want to truly learn something, don't look for the teacher who makes it easiest. Look for the teacher who demands the most. Don't seek the path of least resistance. Seek the path that will transform you completely. Be willing to observe without understanding. Be willing to practice without feedback. Be willing to fail repeatedly until you figure it out yourself. Because the knowledge you earn through struggle becomes yours in a way that knowledge given freely never can. And if you're a teacher, a mentor, a guide to others, understand this. Your job isn't to make things easy. Your job is to hold the standard so high that your students have to become better versions of themselves to reach it. Your job isn't to explain everything. Your job is to demonstrate excellence and allow others to steal it. Your job isn't to comfort. Your job is to transform. The teacher-student bond that built samurai warriors can build anything. It can build mastery in any field, strength in any character, wisdom in any mind. But only if both teacher and student are willing to honor the ancient compact. The teacher demands excellence. The student delivers dedication. Both commit for life. Both transform each other. If you found value in this video, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell so you don't miss future content. Comment below about a teacher who demanded the most from you and how it changed your life. Remember, the greatest teachers don't make the path easy. They make you strong enough to walk the difficult path. Until next time, walk with purpose and honor those who made you who you are.